The NAR is having a settlement with all of the realtors and all the brokers, but you know more about this topic. So set up the issue and let's go around the table.
We spent a lot of time, and so did everybody else, talking about this when it first came out. And, when something like this changes, there's a bunch of speculation about what's actually going to happen. And there's the shock to the system and the people that it affects. But, it went into effect August 17th. And I'm really interested to get Aaron's kind of ear to the ground view on this. But I've had some conversations. I was just in Nevada last weekend, and there was a realtor there that's been a realtor for a long time. And she was actually saying that, she's excited about it because there's 2 odd million realtors. And in this particular town, she said there's 318 realtors and there's only 380 average transactions that happen in this small town per year. And, you like do the math on that. And even though it's a
one
small
for everybody, Mike, it's one for everybody.
It's 1.87 or 1.17% or transaction per person. And again, Aaron would know more about this than I do, but I think that initial shock that happens is always scary and overwhelming, but it's like anything else in any other industry. Even, the next president it's going to destroy the world. We hear that every time. And so I'm just really excited to get into this. The one thing that I thought was fascinating, I was looking at this article on Zillow. They have a new touring agreement that helps agents, in their words, seamlessly adjust to industry changes. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but essentially, as a potential buyer is looking at the houses on Zillow, they can click the link, schedule an appointment with a buyer's agent. And a lot of times, even on Zillow, the agent that's advertising there will have 3, 4, 7 people on their team. And so you're not actually meeting with that particular agent anyway, because somebody's spending a bunch of money on advertising. And this opens up another conversation too, that Aaron, if you could plug this in the back of your head, we can ask this question in a few minutes. But I mean, even the impact that this has had on Zillow and its advertising dollars has been pretty huge, because the majority of the people that are looking at Zillow are actually people that are wanting to buy a house. Obviously, when I had my house listed, I'm not going on Zillow to look at my house. I'm going there if I'm a buyer wanting to, narrow down my short list of houses that I want to actually see with my realtor. And so the majority of people that are going to Zillow are actually buyers. And the majority of the people that are spending money on Zillow are actually sellers. And so, that brings up a whole other dynamic. But what was interesting about this buyer's contract, it actually allows somebody to book an appointment with an agent, get a contract done ahead of time, which is a short-term 7-day contract. And the buyer's agent that's going to represent that person doesn't get a fee. So it's basically now a lead gen source for that agent to show up on site, tour that home with that buyer, and hopefully convert them to a contract that buyer agrees to pay them a buyer's agent fee. So I think this is just completely changing the industry. And Aaron, would love to have your perspective on what's going on out there.
The Zillow thing was the first time I've heard of that. But when we talked about it a couple months ago, one of our thoughts was Zillow was going to be the big winner in the long run. In the short run, maybe not, because you're right. There's so many people that buy agent leads from Zillow. So it sounds like this first adjustment is their way to say, because the biggest thing that everybody's been challenged with is the idea that you can't even show someone a house without signing a buyer's rep agreement. And most agents probably were not, and I've looked at a lot of them. I've seen a lot of people talking about it on our podcast and also just on Instagram and Facebook, right? There are not very many people that are going to be creative enough to say, hey, I'll sign a free showing agreement. I'm going to sign a free buyer's rep agreement. It lasts the next 7 days. I'm going to show you the house, because if the person writes an offer in the next 7 days, essentially you don't get the commission, right? But it is a brilliant way to at least say like, hey, we're going to get you in front of a buyer. It's reassuring the agent. Usually the buyer doesn't like the first house they sign up to anyway. And for the buyer saying, hey, I don't have to pay a buyer agent commission anymore, they can click, they can do that. And then if the agent does a really, really good job, then maybe the buyer says, hey, I want an agent to show me the house. I think we thought in the long run, there's going to be a lot less of that. There's going to be people listing their houses for sale by themselves on Zillow instead. I think that's how Zillow wins in the long run, because the added value of MLS goes away. Like the specific MLS that people had to pay to be a member of, they would get sales data on there, but now, everybody has access to that. Then the other specific thing on MLS is it would say, what is your buyer's agent commission? And it would essentially make the seller pay that buyer agent that commission. Well, now on MLS, you're not allowed to say if you're willing to pay a buyer agent commission. They've removed the buyer agent commission search bar. So where's the added value in MLS anyway? So I do think that Zillow in the long term wins because they're replacing the MLSs. That doesn't help agents in the short term to figure out what to do. I think the Zillow lead gen thing on the front side is probably a smart idea from Zillow. I think it probably will convert to some stuff. It's a way to kind of get around that new law. And it's really banking on the fact that that buyer isn't ever going to buy that first house they click on anyway. But then it's a chance for a buyer to get in front of them, show them that they're nice, and then talk them into signing the new rep agreements. And there's a couple like check boxes on them depending on the state and the way they work. But the new one says like, hey, if I represent you to buy this house, you are going to pay me 3%, whether the seller pays or not. And if it's less than that, you would technically be responsible for the difference. But there's also some check boxes in there that says like the agent is allowed to reduce for less. One smart thing they've done in that negotiation is whatever's signed on that first agreement, an agent is allowed to accept less, but they're not allowed to accept more, right? So let's say they put 2% in it and the listing agent says, we're willing to pay 3%. They can't increase it, which is a funny part of the law, but that's the way those agreements are written, but they can reduce it. So now when an agent is doing the, they go show the house for free with Zillow, doesn't work. They don't like it. Agent says, actually, I can help represent you on some other stuff. Do you want me to send you the things? Buyer says, yeah, that would be great. And say, hey, so this first one that we got to sign for that free showing, that's through Zillow, but actually this crazy new law, I actually have to sign this buyer's rep agreement with you. But now they see them in person. Now they just finished showing them the first house. Maybe they're taking them to coffee afterward to talk about like, hey, the agent shows them the house on Zillow. Hey, that doesn't work. Let's go get coffee really quick. Let's talk about your needs. Okay, I could be your agent, but we need to sign this new agreement. And because some of the text threads I saw was people texting the agent back and saying, hey, but this says I have to pay you 3% even if the seller doesn't pay that. And then the reply is like, yes, but you see the box that says I have the option to get paid less. I'm just going to do that for you. And then when people balk about 3%, you get to say, no, the reason we do that is every once in a while, a seller offers 3%, but I can't make it more. So we have to start this agreement at the highest possible price because that way we don't miss out on that opportunity.
Okay, Mooch.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not as smart as you. So all
That
that
was
mumbo
insightful.
jumbo you just explained.
No, that was good.
I'm sad
Okay.
it's mumbo jumbo. I tried. I worked
I
my heart
know,
off.
but
Go ahead.
you guys understand that. Okay, maybe
Ashish
even
is a
have.
renter. Ashish is a renter. He
Yeah, I'm
doesn't-
a renter.
No,
okay?
I
So
actually love. I
ask-
love you being able to ask. So go ahead, fire away.
Let me ask you, simplify this. Let's go back to the situation that we're talking about. There's a huge lawsuit. Now there's a settlement. If you go to the link I put in the chat here on the NAR website, they got an FAQ. The first thing that they say in the FAQ, and we can pull this up, is we want to get into the settlement to release the liability of all of our members and preserve the choices consumers are regarding real estate services. Are you saying that you admitted that the allegations were true? Still don't even understand what the hell the allegations are. It's like, no, we're not admitting anything. Are people just like cleaning their hands here? What's really going on, my friend? Make it simple.
Yeah, the simplest thing that happened at the beginning, the simple lawsuit at the beginning was pretty much based in the fact that it said, so buyers didn't realize how much their agents were getting paid. And they also didn't realize that the seller may have been willing to sell the home for less if they were paying a smaller commission. Now,
Okay.
sellers, when I was a seller, and sometimes people would reach out to us on Zillow and buyers would say, hey, I'm not actually representing anyone. Can I get a 3% discount because you're not paying my buyer's agent a commission? We would say yes. Very simple commission. Cool. If I'm not paying the 3%, I'll discount you 3% all day long. We had that conversation a lot. And I think the lawsuit really came down to the fact that there was millions of buyers out there that didn't know that was an option. And had they may have made a different decision. You know, the attorneys, it's a money grab, it's things. But when it goes down to that part of the non-disclosure part of the law, it was correct. The other part was collusion, because it was saying like, hey, you had to be a member of the NAR. And then it also said that they would even say at like realtor events, like, no, as long as nobody decides to lower their commission rate, we're all going to get to keep charging 2.5%.
So they've settled for less than $2 billion, which is what they were sued for.
Yeah.
What is the takeaway?
The biggest thing of the new agreement that people are signing on those listing agreements is now they know how much their agent is getting paid.
Okay.
And they also know that it's coming out, that essentially they're paying for it one way or another. And that was the goal. That was the intention, is that people would know how much they were getting paid. I think agents will still be able to be successful. I think there's ways around it. The biggest thing it changes is the pitch used to be when a buyer's agent would get that Zillow lead, they would say, don't worry, I work for you for free. I only get paid if you buy the house and the seller pays me. We used to teach that on the pod. That was how we would tell people, like, that's how you get your first deal.
You're saying.
It's no longer true, because what the whole lawsuit came out to, at that moment, they shouldn't have said, hey, I'm getting paid, I'm free, you don't pay me. Technically they're saying you should have told them, I'm going to get paid 10 grand when you buy the house, but the seller's going to pay me. And the seller probably would actually charge you a little bit less if you came in without an agent. So the industry is going to adjust to it. In the long term, I think, Zillow is the big winner, because people will start buying directly. I had somebody text me this week and say, hey, I have somebody who wants to buy my house. Like, do I need an agent? How do I do it for sale by owner? And it's like, you can write out this contract and contact an escrow agent. That's it. But I think it is important. We did talk about it months ago. It just came into effect a few days ago. Maddie, have you heard anything about it in your world?
No, I'm not playing in the single family or realtor world at all. So it's really something that I haven't paid much attention to, and very glad to be ignorant to this topic.
Great.
In the commercial industrial world, really quick, when you have an agent do you have an agent looking for houses for you and anything?
I always have,
or not houses, sorry, commercial stuff, commercial industrial.
Yeah. I mean, you can be very agnostic in commercial, right? It's whoever the broker is that brings you the deal. There's no real representation of like, hey, you're my guy and you're my only horse that I'm going to jockey up on to find my house or my next investment property, right? It's really, it's around who's out there hunting and killing the best opportunities, and who are they bringing it back to that they think can, help them chop it up and everybody can eat together. And that's a little bit different than the single family world in that capacity.
And sometimes those deals say like buyer to pay their own buyer agent commission, or like if you have a commission added to the sales price.
Yeah. Commercial has been kind of, I would say, further down that road for a very long time. Whereas going back to some of these, I'll call the NAR the mafia. I mean, they act like they're ultimately doing all of these things to protect the industry, when really they're just trying to protect their control over the industry, which is tied to a lot of the policy decision-making power and ultimately the money grab that they've had for so long.
I think that is a great differentiator and example, because I said this 8 months ago or 10 months ago when we were talking about this. I've never once used a buyer's agent buying 35 mobile home parks. Like, it's not a thing in the commercial world. And I think the point that I wanted to make here was Maddie is an experienced, and the expectation is so, an experienced real estate investor. And so we don't necessarily need representation. We get attorneys involved in the deal.
Right.
It's pretty normal in the commercial space there's always going to be a seller's agent. Always.
Yep.
But there's rarely a buyer's agent. And I think the differentiator here is back to Maddie's point on whether it's a true prejudice or whether it's the mafia. The majority of single home buyers are not educated, and they feel like they need protection to go through this super cumbersome. As I was researching this, Zillow actually said this, that in their surveys, almost 50% of people that they surveyed said that they cried at least once during a transaction because of stress. And I think that's the differentiator on the commercial side versus the single family.
Yeah, You're right. That is a differentiator. So it was easy for us to say commercial's always been like that. People will survive, but residential is a more emotional purchase. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, and it's been that way for so long, and nobody knew it could be different. Now that people know it can be different, this is where the evolution of industries and, opportunities happen, right? Is because, like, oh, I thought that's how it had to be. It reminds me of, have you guys heard Grandma's Ham story?
Mm-hmm.
It's really short. It's a great story about kind of like the training of the mind to believe something is what it is until you learn that it's actually not that, and it can be something different too. And so basically it goes like this. A husband and his wife were in their kitchen. The husband was sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper while his wife was preparing a ham for dinner. The husband watched the wife cut off both about 1 inch from either end of the ham. He asked why she cut the end off, proclaiming, "That's a waste of good ham." She said, "That's the way my mom prepared the ham." And the husband asked, "Well, why did your mom cut off the ends?" The wife didn't know. Later, the wife called her mom to find out why she cut the ends of the ham off. Her mom said, "Because that's the way grandma prepared the ham." The wife's grandma passed away several years earlier, but her grandpa was still living. She called her grandpa and asked Grandpa, "Why did grandma cut the ends off the ham?" He was silent as he thought for a moment. Then he replied, "So the ham could fit in the baking pan. That was the only way that she could do it." And so, right, like the lineage of ideology was, oh, it has to be this way because this is the way it has to be done. when really the root of who created the ideology in the first place was, this is just the way I created it.
We've always done it this way.
And therefore NAR now has
Great topic.
it's been exposed that the NAR and their ideology is, well, this is just the way we said it had to be done. And people are like, well, shit, it can be done a whole lot different, in my opinion. So what does that look like? And that's what we're seeing unfold right now, which is creating obviously a lot of disruption, a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities. And I think there's something to be said about that in this particular case study and scenario, and thinking about all the other areas or ideologies or things that we say, no, this is just the way it's done. And the question would be is that the best way of doing it? Is this the way it really has to be done? Because the people who are thinking through that lens and who are asking those kind of questions are the ones who start making changes in positive and productive ways, that there is something better that could be the result of us looking at this a little bit differently.
I have a stupid idea time question that I was thinking about last night. Back to the concept that we were talking about last week, buy now, pay later. Is there any opportunity, like in the insurance world, where, you know, as an agent, you get a residual payment every month for a plan that you sold? Is there any opportunity on the buyer's agent side to finance a commission over 2 or 3 years with like a second on the home?
That's I don't
mean,
know why
hey,
not.
Now we're
Why
talking,
not?
baby. I see a
That
new
sounds
industry.
like it's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we could pull on that thread, right? And really start brainstorming around how that could be a good or a bad thing, or what the pros and cons of it would be. But it's definitely something to think about.
Well, when there's an opportunity for a middleman get created. Fun. Okay, well, let's get into some economic discussion. I want to bring up Kamala Harris. You know, she just got basically appointed here as the lead Democratic candidate. And in the last week or so, she's really started to put together her policy plan and her choices. This is not a discussion of whether we necessarily agree or not, or a political stance from our side. But I thought, well, we all discussed this and said, hey, let's go through some of this and have a really healthy economic discussion about the pros and cons of this, just to steel man these issues. And so I want to bring up some of these topics. We're going to stay focused on 3 of them specifically, but she's really focusing on the economy. As you guys know, her first policy is about economic proposals, where she's trying to save about $40 billion of tax incentives for home builders, specifically to give first-time home buyers up to $25,000 for the down payment of their first home. Lots of smart guys on this call that can steel man that for sure. The second one, you know, that I thought was kind of interesting too, is healthcare. They've really been loud on this healthcare, prescription drugs, reducing prices on prescription drugs. They've been able to reduce the cost of insulin to about $35 per patient, but really fixing the out-of-pocket, capping the out-of-pocket expenses for prescription drugs at $2,000. Somebody's paying for that. Just don't know who, and that's going to be a fun conversation.
Oh, we know who's paying for it.
And what was the other topic, guys? She's also giving about a $6,000 credit for childcare, and there was one other one that I'm missing here.
You've got corporate tax.
Oh, and the corporate tax.
We've got the unrealized gains, capital gains tax. We've got price gouging. There's a lot of stuff. You know, she went from having more boxes and pronouns on her website than she did policy to now this week starting to roll out some of those policy discussions, and it's got a lot of people talking.
Okay, so let's kind of pick one at a time. You're right, I missed that. So she's interested in increasing the corporate tax rate to 28%. She wants to tax unrealized capital gains. That's a new one for me. Would love to digest that one. Why don't we stay focused on the taxes first? Let's process that. Let's kind of understand what are the impacts of this. Obviously, a lot of these things are just talking points in the election process, right? They're doable if she wants to do them. The price gouging thing is also interesting to fix. I mean, basically, it's killing capitalism, is telling companies that what you're allowed and what you're not allowed to charge. So that's a whole nother topic. But let's start with tax rates. Mooch, thoughts? Don't give us the obvious answer of increasing tax rates is not good. We all know that, at least on our side. But what are your thoughts? Do you have an opinion about this?
Let me lay this out so Mooch has some context to these 3.
Thank you.
So she is supporting a tax increase that President Biden put forward in his recent budget proposal, which includes a 25% minimum tax on individuals with more than $100 million in wealth. Then we've got the corporate tax rate that they are proposing get raised up to 28%, which currently has been 21% since 2018. This would be the first hike in corporate tax rate in over 40 years. And then we've got the unrealized capital gains tax that is a real big issue, in my opinion. And I'll just run through a quick little scenario that I saw somebody roll out online today that I thought was a good explanation of it. And then I'll kick it over to you, to Mooch, to kind of get your thoughts on it and ping pong some dialogue here. But on the unrealized capital gains, like, why is this not a good thing, or what could result from this? So let's just say that you bought 100 shares of Zoom stock in January of 2020 for $75 a share. And it ends the year at $350 per share, but you decided, I'm not going to sell. I'm going to hold. So now all of a sudden you have this unrealized gain on that stock amount of $27,500. Under this particular policy, you now owe, you didn't sell anything, you now owe, based on those gains, $6,875 in taxes. That's 25% of that $27,500 in gain that you just received. But you didn't sell. So you haven't
received it.
You haven't received it. You don't have the cash. Okay. So now you're paying taxes to the government on those unrealized gains out of your personal savings, assuming that you had those savings in the first place. Then let's say you continue to hold until the next year, or let's just say today, you finally sell those for $60 per share. So now you not only pay the $6,875 on the peak value of that, but now you lost $1,500 on the stock, plus you paid the taxes that you never actually received any income from. So the initial tax proposal only targets $100 million in net worth. So that's kind of what, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, it doesn't apply to me. But that's just the start. It opens up the gates to lower the threshold whenever they choose to do that, right? They're saying, oh, well, the bar's up here. Don't worry, that doesn't apply to you. But in 5, 10, 15 years down the road, that could very well apply to you. Oh. And before you know it, every person who owns a stock is now paying taxes on unrealized gains. So then people are going to go, well, I don't want to buy stocks. Why would I want to do that if I'm going to have to pay taxes on something that I don't even get to take advantage of? Companies have less capital to invest in new products and develop technology. The economy obviously takes a hit because of that. Jobs are lost. Like, you can see the potential theory around how this could be very bad and how it could disincentivize part of our industry and economic kind of juggernaut of the US economy, with the stock market becoming disincentivized because of these things. So that's just one potential example or scenario of how that could play out over time. And it's got a lot of people who obviously are investors, wealth builders, business owners, really up in arms and thinking about how this impacts them.
The unrealized capital gains is hard because for stocks, it's a very simple calculation, right? But the simple solution on stocks is everyone just sells their stocks on December 31st and they buy them back again on January 1st. And then you can, take your gain and your loss that year. But instead of having $30,000 worth of stock, you come back with 25 because you paid tax on it. So that is a bump. That's a simple solution for that one, but it is a bummer because essentially they're taxing you every year on something now. And I guess if you lose money on it the next year, so or most of the gains that you had, it probably ends up offsetting. I think where that gets scarier is in real assets that are tough to define values of. In real estate assets, like, every time they do property taxes on a property of yours, you're always like, it's not worth that. If I could sell it for that, I'd sell it today.
Right.
Like, say, oh, your apartment complex is worth X. And you want to go argue on it. That's where the unrealized capital gains, I think, is a scary part, is getting charged taxes on something you haven't actually monetized and or can't. So like, whereas in stocks, you could sell them on December 31st, at least you'll have the cash to pay the tax. But if you own $100 million in real estate and now you get taxed on that and you go to sell it, you're probably going to have to pay your tax. You're going to have to, rush to sell it to pay the tax. It just doesn't really work. I think you came up with one scenario. There are so many scenarios where it becomes just nearly impossible to do it. So I hope that what happens with that is as they try to write that law, they actually just realize that it can't be done very well. This one I thought was interesting. So this is the other one that you mentioned, right? So the capital gains tax, I'm putting a chart on the screen. It shows where they're proposing it's going to be at 48% for for capital gains tax. And if you look historically, what's that say? It's like kind of been at 28 a lot of the time. You know, lowest it's been in the last 50 years has been 16%, 15 or 16%. So it's 15 or 16% for a while. In 2015, it went up to 20%. The whole point of the capital gains tax is it would be less than your regular income tax. So it would encourage people to hold real estate for more than a year or two. It would prevent flippers and it would reward homeowners that lived in their house for a couple of years. For highest long-term capital gains tax, the goal was that rate would always be less than your regular income tax. So that way, if someone bought a house and they sold it, they would wait and they would pay only 20% on their capital gains, where maybe their regular tax rate is 30 or something like that. What I don't like about this chart and what they're proposing there, or what I think is dangerous about it, let's say this chart goes all the way back from 1900. It would be the highest ever. And if you went back 100 years, there is maybe 10 years where it was over 30%, right? And now we're talking about going up to 45. So 90% of the last 100 years, this wasn't even heard of. So making that drastic of a change of like, hey, we've never done it like this at all, and now we're going to jump way up into here that's like something that's unfathomable, is pretty wild. You know, a lot of the things that you mentioned, there's some of them I'm not necessarily that against, or some of them I could kind of get behind. But this is the one that I saw this morning. I was like, no thanks. Both the capital gains tax ones are the things that I think are the most dangerous for all individuals. And yeah, Matt, your point is good, where they say, hey, it's only going to affect the super wealthy or the people that make over a certain amount of money. Now, a lot of people can say, so that doesn't affect me, so it's fine. And most of the time, that's my answer. Most of the time I say, if it doesn't affect me, it's fine. I don't care. It doesn't affect me. But I think it's this form of trying to silence people that could oppose the government, which is like not like in a Micah Yila metal, aluminum hat type of way, but just this idea that like only taxing super wealthy people a crazy, crazy tax amount, when the super wealthy people like Elon are the only people that are changing the world. They're changing the world with their extra money. Most of the super wealthy people are changing the world with their extra money. And it's talking about a really big haircut on some of that stuff. So I hope that those two things don't come to fruition. People have been talking about them for a long time. Capital gains tax comes up a lot. You can even see by the chart that, after 2000, after September 11th, that was one of the things that happened after September 11th. That's when they dropped it down to 15% for so many years. It's kind of a response to try to stimulate economy, at the same time. So, but yeah, the unrealized one, I think that's dangerous.
In the last cycle there in California, they were talking about eliminating 1031s or something like that.
They were doing that, and they also had a wealth tax. Even if you left the state, they were coming after you.
Yeah. I guess the question is these things are always going to be on the docket, right? If taxes are low, what's going to be on the docket is to increase taxes. That's just going to be a conversation. I was having a really fun debate with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying that basically their philosophy of making money is, I'm just going to keep doing things that allow me to pay taxes on my income now and let that money grow. A lot of other people put money into tax deferred things like 1031s, and I'll pay the tax later. What do you guys think about that? Should we be thinking about the world? If you think about the trajectory of tax, it's over the arc of time, 20 years time. It's maybe relevant for us and our listeners is you can argue that there's a higher probability that tax rates will be higher in 20 years than they are now, just based on forces. So is it smarter to let money grow post-tax, or is it better to grow money pre-tax and then pay the tax when you need it 20 years from now? What's your thoughts about that?
I think it depends on the individual. And this is what I was saying. Well, like Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey is very good for a certain type of individual that doesn't have like financial education. Aaron said this, a couple weeks back, like when we were talking about a firm. He's like, why would I not finance something on 0% interest when I can take that $7,000 and go and invest it? And so I'm using simple versions of this because I think a lot of people don't think about, deferred taxes. But when it comes to, investing in a 401k, I think you should pay the taxes today and do like an IRA, like a Roth, and not pay the taxes 25, 35 years from now. But that's for a certain type of individual. Now, as far as like the person that you were talking to, and I think depending on, where the listener sits, and it's an individual decision, but if I'm going to pay an additional $75,000 in taxes today, and I could defer that for 10 years, what kind of return could you get on that $75,000 if you didn't pay the taxes on it today. And I'm pretty sure that if you have any, investment sense, can start a business, can invest in real estate. I mean, hell, you could lend it to Matty Aitchison at probably, 8 or 9% on a bridge loan until he can get permanent financing and make a boatload of money. And when you think about compound interest,
Yes.
and the compound earnings of that money over 20 or 30 years, my personal opinion is you'd be crazy to pay the taxes on it today and not utilize it. Even if 1031 went away, or at some point in time down the road, I had to sell half of my portfolio to pay the taxes. If you've been smart along the way, I think you're going to be better off paying the taxes later and using the facilities that are at play. But it's an individual choice, and it's all about financial education, I think.
But ultimately, do you think the net number at the end is different?
100%.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I want to do the math on that. What do you think, Mooch?
I've got a non-net, opinion on it. My mom has a bunch of money that's in accounts and investments that tax wasn't paid on originally. And she struggles right now with things that she wants. Like, she should be enjoying a giant retirement, and she gets to pull out enough to get by and all these things and does her things. But when she wants to do something bigger, right? Like, she can't really. And I try to say, like, hey, you have a lot of money in different things. And she'll say, but if I have to pull this out, I have to pay a really significant tax hit on it. So that is preventing her from actually living her life to the fullest. My
father-in-law has the same issue. You're spot on.
It's like, there's this other emotional part to it where I'm like, well, I was like, is there ever a point that you don't pay the taxes on it? And no, because I kind of thought, well, after retirement age or something, it was like, no matter what, once you break it open, you're going to have to pay the taxes on it. So it feels more like this thing that was used to lock up investments from people than actually like benefit. So I think people should pay the tax now, so it's not a stress later when you're actually stressed about things like that.
And I agree with that, Aaron. Like, if you're going to invest in, traditional investments, 401k, I'm 100% with you, because pay the taxes today and don't worry about it later. Let it compound in your retirement account. So I agree with you 100%. Just to clarify my caveat, if you can, deploy that capital and defer the taxes till later and make a return on that, you want to do the math on it.
I did the math. It's exactly the same. It doesn't matter.
In theory, but if you invest your money on something better,
because I was going to say, you're going to play the arbitrage game on yield. So it's, if I pay tax now and I have less money to invest in an asset that's going to yield me X, or I defer that tax over time and I have a much larger egg that I'm cracking open into another asset that's generating the same yield, compound effect is going to kick in and start to generate much higher yield over time.
It doesn't, unless the yield is different against scenario A and scenario B. It doesn't. If the yield is the same.
But that's what I'm saying. Most people aren't just going to want to transition from the same thing to the same thing. You're doing it based on opportunistic, right? Or else there's no point in doing anything. You might as well just stay put and do what you're doing. There's no need to rock the boat.
There's inflation and stuff too. I mean, I would say that you probably make more money if you defer your taxes.
100%
right?
You do.
But I think emotionally, so I think no matter what, you make more money if you defer the taxes because you reinvest it on better arbitrage and with inflation and everything else. But I think from an emotional status and emotional space, what I've learned more recently that I didn't know 5 years ago was I think it's more important for people to pay the taxes now, because otherwise.
Fun debate.
Yeah.
Well,
it's interesting. I mean, it's.
Yeah. And not to get, I don't want to get complex on this, but even like what Aaron and Maddie are saying, even just with inflation, I mean, if you took the same $1 million or $100,000 that you were going to pay in taxes and just paid cash, no leverage, just paid cash for a house, I'm pretty sure 30 years from now, that house is going to be worth way more than your tax bill would have been, paying it along the way, just purely in a real estate perspective.
Can we talk about the healthcare one? And then I think we should do some fireside one. But it was.
I want to hear the price gouging one too, and get your guys' thoughts on that, because I think that's a big government overreach.
The healthcare one, I think it said something like everyone could pay a maximum of $2,000 a year for prescription medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now,
this is a great topic.
I think it's a great topic in the sense that I am a capitalist with everything, and medicine is where I struggle with it.
Yeah, me too.
Why? Because of your personal journey with it?
Yeah, because Maddie got cured from an uncurable disease, my daughter, but it cost a lot of money. And it creates this pseudo gratitude and guilt all at the same time. Because, okay, I work hard for my money, so I get to spend it. But as a parent, do I have any more right than anyone else for my daughter to not be sick? And I'd say no. So I hate that there's so much wrong with our healthcare system. But
so let me add to that. This is really interesting to contrast it with the grocery fixed pricing topic.
yeah,
Because you
it's
could
okay,
argue
it's similar.
that
It's related.
well,
yeah.
it's related. And here's, let me try to connect the dots and then get your guys' feedback. We heard this in the All In Pod, right, too. So I'm not even going to take credit for it, is that the food industry is an incredibly competitive marketplace, driving prices down. I had a really fun conversation with some healthcare investing guys a couple weeks ago, and I asked them the same exact question. Is Mark Cuban onto something with costplusdrugs.com? Is he going to solve a really big problem? And they said, no. I said, what do you mean? How can you tell me that people don't want transparency? How do we not know the prices of drugs? He goes, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry, an investor, private equity for like 20 years. I'm telling you, it's like gangsters. Nobody knows the price of anything and how they determine price. So I would argue, Mooch, that the pharmaceutical industry is actually not a perfect capitalistic market. It's not a market that drives prices down. And the convoluted way between pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, PBMs, how they all negotiate. You know, my wife's a pharmacist who specifically works in PBMs. They only give you a certain amount of information that they feel like you need, and then they just tranche out all the information. It's almost like a mafia controlling prices. And so essentially, they take advantage of the needs of the consumer. They take advantage of the insurance companies, and they just charge whatever the hell they want to charge. And unless somebody has the fortitude to just take a sledgehammer and break it all open, billionaires who have nothing to lose, in another way of saying it, this system ain't going to change. And so you have these like really interesting contrasts. So I'd love you to give, that's my two thoughts.
It's a great way to tee it up. I'll hit both those things really quick, and then I want to just listen. That one stuck out to me as this thing that it was like, hey, you know, would free healthcare be that bad? Do I think everyone should have the same amount of healthcare available to them? Yeah. What are the exceptions? Oh, the smoker that gets the same treatment as a little girl. No, you know what? I can oversimplify it and say when it comes to like medical care, it'd be great if everybody got the same care. The downside of a socialistic medical system is no one's going to want to be a great doctor that cures everything if they don't get paid a lot of money for it, because it's a big commitment to become a doctor. So I know all those arguments. The very simple one they're talking about of a, you know, $2,000 max out of pocket for pharmaceutical drugs. As I read that, I was like, you know what? Wouldn't be that bad. Now, does tax money have to pay for it? Yeah, in theory. Would Trump if the funny thing is, I think if Trump prepared it, he would say, hey, we're going to do this 2,000 max out of pocket, and the pharmaceutical companies are going to eat the difference or whatever, or they're going to have to you know, but again, when you start putting government into medical, then just new products get built and things like that. But that one was the easy one to say, you know what, it's really easy to say a solution like that. Figuring out who to pay for it or how to make it fair is the hard part. And does it really cost other consumers? Who actually pays the bill? Because Maddie's point is somebody pays the bill. Somebody pays the bill. But that was one when I saw it, I was like, you know what? I wouldn't have an objection to that, knowing that the tough part is how does somebody pay the bill on it? The food lockdown one, to me, just seems like just somebody that isn't very smart on that concept. Like during COVID, when people are selling toilet paper for $100 instead of $10, like that's price gouging. And that's like, you can't prevent inflation by just saying don't raise your prices anymore, unless you do it to everybody, unless you do it to the trucking company, unless you do it to gas and everything else. Like the whole idea of how much I pay for a banana at the store has very little to do with the store and what the store charges me.
I think let's call a spade, right? We know why she's doing it, because that's where people feel the pain. And so it's a really great talking point in an election. But I think it's what we're trying to do here is to break open that can of worms, to explain to people, like, what does that really mean when you do that? What does that mean to economics? And
and I don't care whether it's Kamala and the Democrats or Trump.
It doesn't matter who says it.
This has been a discussion point forever in the last 20, 30 years.
Just flat out bad policy, whoever proposes it.
Well, and the reality is, I mean, even back to medicine or food or anything else, This comes back to, and I know everybody on this pod has heard this before, but really what is inflation? It's just another form of tax. And the governments use it. Again, I don't want to put on a tinfoil hat here, but this is the reality of it. When you have a central bank that is going to manipulate the prices of money over time, when you look at the purchasing power of the dollar from 1913 to today, the purchasing power of that dollar has gone down. It's exactly what you guys are saying on food. It's exactly what we're saying on medicine. It isn't, by the way, there's certain industries like the medical industry that I think is just crazy, the pharmaceutical industry. And I agree with Aaron. It's sad that people can't afford it. It's also sad that people can't afford housing, and it's sad that people can't afford food. But the reality is, like, it's not Kamala and it's not, Donald Trump, either one of them saying that they're going to like bring housing prices down and all of that. They can't do that. Like, they literally can't do that. We live in a monetary system that just will not allow it until there's a complete reset. And even back to the tax conversation, there's a day 40 or 50 years from now where I used to say, you know what, taxes are going to be so much higher. No, they're not, because we're going to be in a completely different financial system at that point in time. I can almost guarantee it. This can't go on the way that it's going now. And if you even look during COVID, I think we might have even talked about this on this podcast, but you're getting paychecks, stimulus checks and all this stuff, and then your tax bill's going up. And I'm like, why am I still paying taxes if you're giving me free money? This is a broken monetary system, and the Dems aren't going to fix it, and the Republicans aren't going to fix it. It was programmed this way. And it is sad at the end of the day, but unfortunately, it ain't coming down. It ain't coming down anytime soon. None of it.
What I liked about what you said there, which just made me pause for a second, was you're like, and it's sad about housing, and it's sad about groceries, and it's, the affordability on so many things. So that one hit my heartstrings a bit when it hit, right? The pharmaceutical piece of it and the medication and things like that. But maybe it's just knowing there's like so many topics out there of affordability that are hurting people, like buying food and like medication. But but it's the same problem as affordability with anything else. With the same problem that doesn't really have a solution because you can't actually change what people are willing to pay for things. So it's just unique that, like I guess the ones that are pointed out are just ones that hit your emotions harder.
100%, which is what they know they can continue to play on, because at the end of the day, you look at the real logic behind a lot of this stuff.
It works on me.
These trenches are only getting dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and we're becoming more enslaved without even knowing it, right? I mean, it's just the truth. If you really want to just pull back all the emotion and just start stripping down common sense and logic around a lot of this stuff, it really is getting worse and worse for us and everybody in general, right? The system is designed to benefit certain people who understand at a high level how these strings are being pulled so they can kind of ride those wakes. But at the end of the day, it's not designed for any of us to win at the highest level. And in a perfect, example with this price gouging thing, right? Like, if we were to really play that out, at the end of the day, like you said, a perfect example, unless you're going to go and tell the trucking companies they can't, put a markup on this, and you're going to go and tell the manufacturers they can't do that, and you're controlling prices across the board. You can't just go and tell grocery stores who, if you look at, there is an index that shows profitability for most industries and companies. The grocery industry has a very slim margin as it already sits. And so when you think
low
about
single digits,
yes, it's like 1.4 or something like that. Like it's very low. And so when you think about the Harris plan to control prices at the grocery store, well, that to me, I'm like, shit, man, I'm spending $400 a week at the grocery store right now with my kids. Like, fortunately I'm in a position I can do that. But I think about the family of 4 or 5 that has the same type of situation, but maybe not the, needs, but not the same financial situation. How does that make sense? So that if it matters to me, I know sure as hell matters to them. But if we really start to think about this, and you talk about controlling, and that's just the beginning, because going back to our point around, the capital gains thing and the $100 million, and it starts here and it doesn't matter to me. It's the fact that it sets precedent. And the second you set precedent, now everything is on the table. So it might start at groceries, or it might start at the $100 million person. And then all of a sudden, 2 decades later, it's on somebody who's a millionaire. And because of inflation, we're all millionaires. I don't know, right? But when you think about that, setting precedent, it's a big deal. And so when you think about this grocery one, just to think about some of the theories behind that, right? The grocery store in the low income area that's barely making a buy and keeping their stuff, and they're not some big name brand, and you're controlling their ability to set prices and wages. Well, guess what? Those grocery stores, they're now shutting down. Now, guess who's already underserved and getting further underserved? It's the areas that have high crime rates, that have, low incomes. And when you start thinking about those areas where the crime rates, insurance premiums, and taxes are high, that means that higher grocery prices, particularly for consumers living in lower income communities, are going to be the first to be impacted. And the people that they're saying they're actually trying to help, it's hurting them the most. But the most important thing of this issue is to think about, again, the government coming into areas that they shouldn't be in, that they're saying they're doing it for our own good. It's ultimately one more step in controlling free and open markets, which at the end of the day, call it what you want, communism, socialism, whatever it is. It's not something that ultimately has shown over the history of America and being a capitalistic country what has made things so great for all of us. You go and do those things. I don't think this is the right answer.
But if I'm in the food line, I don't care about capitalism. I think that's the trend, right?
So then that's the question. Are we that far gone that everybody's mindset is that now?
That's what's
is capitalism
that
dead?
Maybe that's what's dangerous, right? Is that when enough people stop thinking about the big picture and they think about the just right now, this minute, and they allow themselves to be pandered to by the people that are making these rules, that vicious circle that creates momentum, and it's hard to stop, right? And so, like, I loved everything you said. I think in third world countries, places like India, places like Mexico, you go to these very rural towns, the voting line, there are people handing out bags of rice, bags of beans, and they're saying, this candidate is giving you this this bag of rice and beans, right? It is the form of bribery to just say, shit, this guy put food on my table, therefore this person is the right person for me. I want you to comment. I think it's really interesting too, and nothing we can do about it. Interesting to think that no company in the world has a leader that was voted in by the employee base. That employees did not decide that this is the right person to run this company or lead this company. It was a group of people that know what it takes to grow and learn and be productive business or profitable business that select, hey, that's going to be our CEO. Except politics. Politics, we have people that vote people in that have no idea what it takes to run a government or a country, right? And yeah, you can have these balance of power. It's just fun anecdotal thing. But what are you guys, where are you going?
I like what Aaron said earlier when he was talking about medicine. And you guys were just talking about capitalism. And then we could talk about socialism, which back to what you were saying, Ashish, and Maddie was touching on this too. I think the problem is the extremism and the talking points. And like you're saying, the bag of rice and all of that. And the reality is we need a version of both of them. But a lot of people that don't have anything think of capitalism bad. But the majority of people that truly believe in capitalism, whether it's a home builder, whether it's a grocery store owner, whatever, they're not getting filthy rich off of owning a grocery store. Yes, they own it for 60 years and they did well, but most builders are not filthy rich. They just worked hard their whole life and built a good business and made a little bit of money every year and was smart with it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with, I'm not going to say capitalism and socialism. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting wealthy. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with helping the poor. And if the government didn't get in the middle of it,
right,
the people that are wealthy, back to what you guys were saying earlier about Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and everything else, they would probably help the poor. How many times, and I know everybody on this podcast is very generous. How many times have you done something where you donated $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 or gave the man on the street that's starving or the woman with kids on the corner money, or you helped a family that was in need, or somebody's husband died? That stuff all goes unnoticed. And you guys are all evil capitalists that actually, if the government stayed out of the way, you would probably be more generous and invest more and make more money. But then taking the other side of it, there's a lot of people that genuinely need help and it's not their fault,
right,
whether it's medicine, homes. Yep. And really, one of my favorite ads that I've seen this political season was a Donald Trump ad that was, it said nothing. It was Kamala Harris, and she was standing at a podium and she's like, in 2020, the price of bread was $3 and now it's $6 and the price of fuel was this. And she's saying in 2020 and now it's this, and I'm going to change that. This is the woman that's been in like
since 2020, she's been in office.
And I'm like, you're just totally pandering to what your audience wants to hear. And nobody's even listening to it. They're cheering. And all she's actually saying is that while I was in office with my current president, Joe Biden, we created all of this and we're going to fix it. No, you're not. Nobody's going to fix it.
It is very interesting when you get to the point of, and to back you up, Aaron, because I feel the same way on certain issues as well, where I'm like, this should be free for everybody, or everybody should have access to this, you know, or this should have some, and it makes me think about in the overall game that we're playing in our world government or our US government, there's so many little micro games being played, and some are just completely owned and you think you're playing a game, but you're not. You're actually controlled and you're just a pawn in the game. And then some games you can play and create your own destiny and future for. And it's interesting to think about, where can you control your destiny, your fate, and your future in a game? And where do you just think you're playing a game that you have the ability to do that, but you're not?
Fascinating. I think it's interesting that the pharmaceutical game hasn't been cracked yet. You know, you think about energy and even some of the biggest industries in the United States, automobiles and furniture, all those industries started to collapse. Interesting that pharmaceuticals is such a hard place to crack, right?
No, it's not.
Mooch, any last comments to you? And then let's talk about the housing incentive. Any thoughts on these? Or you want to?
No, I don't need it. And I don't ever like saying, man, it's the way it is and there's no solution. Right. But it does remind me of why we try to find our own ways for things. And, you know, and it comes off as probably selfish in a way. Any of these parts of the conversation are tough when we're talking about affordability of healthcare, affordability of food, affordability of everything else, and knowing they've been problems since the beginning of time. And maybe the most frustrating thing is when they become a political pitch with very little backing for what the actual part is of that destiny. It's just that reminder of like, that for me. So no, I think that was a good discussion. I think it was good that we got to talk about all that stuff. And I appreciate you guys wanting to even bring up the medical care thing, because for four smart guys, you know, that's one where it's tough to say like, you know what, in theory, I like that idea.
Let's talk about the housing. $40 billion they're interested in spending $40 billion to give a $25,000 incentive to first-time home buyers, hoping that this quote unquote reduces the prices of real estate. We have some really smart guys that are going to debunk that for you and tell you why that's not going to happen. Are they really trying to reduce the prices of housing here by this incentive? Are they just trying to get, you know, whatever that number is, a few 100,000 people more, you know, young families into homes that otherwise couldn't afford it? What's really going on here? What are going to be the economic impacts to real estate prices, supply and demand? We have a huge supply problem in the United States, but then at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity. I think Mooch, you said it in a post that there's plenty of houses available if people want to buy them. So let's unpack this. Mooch, why don't you start, and then we can go around the docket here.
Here's what's crazy. I love this as an idea. I love this as a concept. And maybe not for the reasons you guys are thinking. I mean, partially because I'm in housing. Second part of this is they did this after the crash in 2009, 2010, 2011. There was a lot of like tax incentives, first-time home buyer stuff. Here's what I don't want to see happen. I don't want the Fed to drop rates 2 points in order to get people off the fence for housing. But the industry that's taken the biggest hit over the Fed being high is real estate, whether it's residential or commercial. Mm-hmm. This is an example of a tool that the government can use to prop up an individual industry. So who will it affect? Like, so a first-time home buyer can now buy a house with less money down. This has been done before. It happens all the time. Every time it happens, it stimulates, it turns like, so that means however many buyers it is, those are people that weren't going to buy a house before, period. They were not going to buy a house. Now they are going to buy a house. When you have more buyers, then homes are going to sell for more. So the actual house is going to sell for more. For those first-time home buyers, the actual out-of-pocket is going to be less. They're going to save whatever that tax credit is. So they're going to be able to buy a house for whatever that discount is. The winners are the people that are trying to sell their houses, because now their houses will sell for that amount more. When if you have 10 people trying to buy the same house, it's going to sell for more than if you have one person trying to buy the house. So it won't make housing sales prices cheaper. It'll make them go up. Pitching it to help home buyers, I don't really care. I mean, I think that I think things like that should be stimulus that they're thinking about to help commercial and residential real estate developers for it. But it won't bring the sales price down at all. But for the individuals that get the credit, they will put less out of pocket to buy a home. It's like they've done different versions of this since the beginning of time, just every 5-10 years.
Is that going to allow more people that wouldn't have qualified before and shouldn't be buying a home an opportunity to do so? And will that lead to problems down the road?
I guess you would say, so VA home buyers are able to buy with no money down, and they have been since the beginning of time too, right? So it's essentially giving normal people the opportunity to be a VA buyer, an FHA buyer. Is there always more risk if people do no money down? Yep. And maybe some people would say, hey, VA would be less risky because military are already vetted to be better people, or not. Like, so the reality is yes, there will be some people buying that wouldn't be able to otherwise. We've put these like, blocks in place for a reason, to make sure people have the down payments. But there's always been a giant exception to that rule, and that's been the VA loan. And I don't know what the percentages of people that use VA, but out here in Texas, a lot of the loans are VA.
To add to that point of why I'm just not a fan of this at all, number one, $40 billion acting like the good old government is, giving everybody a gift. We're already in the highest, debt amount the U.S. has ever seen, ever. And that's growing at a speed and pace like never seen before. And so to me, all this does is, signal that for the sake of helping people that probably couldn't or shouldn't be buying a home in the first place, to do that, to give them that dream of home ownership and allow them the opportunity to achieve that. And don't get me wrong, I think some people totally qualify, check all the boxes, but I think there's a good amount that won't, is creating an extremely highly inflationary situation again. Not only will larger budget deficits be incurred to cover the cost of the program, which is going to be funded by U.S. American taxpayers, it's going to lead to overall higher inflation, and the payments themselves are directly going to push home prices even higher. And so it feeds more demand, which we already know is really not an issue right now. That there's plenty of demand in the marketplace, and it doesn't fix anything on the supply side, which that is the real issue here. It's creating better incentives for the groups and the organizations and the cities and the municipalities, and incentivizing development, incentivizing ways to create more supply. It's incentivizing like what you guys are doing. The one thing that I would say I agree with what Gavin Newsom did, and probably one of the only things I agree with what he's done here in California recently, was allow for that ADA and creating more opportunity in a very cost-effective way to put another unit on the back of your property. You can generate more income. It creates more housing supply, right? And that's an issue that actually is solving something, or that's a policy that's actually solving an issue that really does tie into this. And so while I think it sounds great on paper, and for the people that are going free money, and right, those are all the same people that were looking at the helicopter money dropping down during COVID, going free money, and oh shit, I hate that we're at 9% inflation now, 12 months later. Well, no shit, right? So these are the things that I think these types of policies prey on financially illiterate individuals, and don't understand that what they're getting up front is actually creating a 4 times larger problem down the road and around the corner that they're not even looking at. And that is the problem that we need to get out of, in creating more of these types of discussions. And again, I'm not saying because it's Harris. I'm saying if Trump proposed this, I would be saying the same thing. Policy, leadership, and governance tie into our lives, our businesses, our bank accounts, our kids, our families, our communities in more ways now than ever. And so to think that at face value these things are good without really peeling back the layers of the onion, I think is extremely dangerous, and we need more people talking about this kind of stuff.
It's good. It's a good discussion. It's a hard problem. Lots of hard problems, It's interesting to hear everyone's takes. Good discussion. I wanted to make our big announcement, guys. Unfortunately, listeners, we appreciate everything that you guys have done supporting us up to now, but unfortunately, the King's Table podcast is going to take a pause. Wah, wah, wah. I want to give a chance for everyone to kind of comment and talk about what the podcast has meant to each of us, but it's just been a season where our maybe not the right time, and I don't want to elaborate any more than that on my side, but it's just maybe not the right time. We have a lot of stuff going on. Our listener base maybe is not as engaged with us, or we're not engaging as much as we want it to be, and we want to really impact as many lives as we can. So we've decided for now not to kill it, but to pause it. And if it comes back alive, we'll let you know. But, firstly, I just wanted to say that I'm incredibly grateful for the three of you. I think it's been an amazing journey that we've been on for a little bit more than a year now. Of course, this was my idea that I called Mike with, and I told him that we should do this podcast and all that kind of stuff. But
I thought it was me and Mooch's idea.
It's been an absolutely amazing journey. I've learned so much from all of you. It's been really fun to have deep quality debate with smart guys and not have a vested interest in being right, just to have good debate, learn different perspectives, learn how to have an opinion, which all of that was my intention. And ultimately click the record button and let other people listen and hear and share and debate with us. So I feel like from that perspective, I feel like it was a huge win, and I'm definitely excited for everyone's next chapter, but also sad that this chapter has taken a pause for a minute. But let you guys kind of comment on your thoughts, and we'll go around the table. Mooch?
Yeah, the August 10th last year was when we came out with this thing.
Dang.
And I know it wasn't my idea. And I was just looking back. So August 10th last year, we had 5,685 people listen to that episode. And I was just looking at that very first episode that we pushed out as the pilot. At the end of that episode, 27% of the people were still listening. So we did get to feel like we were off to the races with something. And what a fun start on that. So 5,685 people heard that first episode. That was just on my channel at the time. You guys were also posting it on your channel, so we know those numbers.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Are higher. Right. Along the way. Plus we had YouTube. We had 16,000 people go on our YouTube to listen to Vivek, our interview with Vivek. Like, when I think about highlight moments of doing the pod, what a cool thing and a cool accomplishment with that. Our tone and our topics have changed a lot over the past year based on what is going on with the world as news, what we were doing with our businesses. What I know that we can be really proud of is realizing that at the beginning, we tell everybody when you go do something, you can't just start and stop. There's so many millions of podcasts that have one episode ever published. And I think at the beginning, we kind of said, we're committing to this thing for a year, and we did it. We went for more than a year. And I say we've only missed 5 or 6 episodes. The guy said maybe we've missed like 10 episodes or something like that. But we've done this thing for a year, and it's been the one commitment that I've held on to. And I think maybe the coolest thing that we've done is spoken openly and honestly about everything. This has not been the podcast where people brag about stuff that isn't real. This has not been the influencer podcast where we're trying to pitch coaching or pitch anything. We've been out here trying to share news that we thought was relevant, that we thought people need to be here. And everybody that's ever commented on YouTube and asked us a question or told us they're there, and, to the gal that came into my office, Debbie, who came to my office last week, gave me your business card and said, thanks for always publishing the King's Table. I listen to it every week. That's why we've continued to do it. But again, when we get to see about the people that are out there listening to podcasts, this is the first time that we've seen the stats from the first show, at least together, that I showed it with you guys. And I thought it was pretty cool to see, like, anytime you're rating a podcast and a third of the people are still listening to it when it's over, that's a really big deal. So we knew we were onto something right away. And as we've changed over the last year, I think so has the pod and the rest of it. So it's been great. It's been fun. And we made it a year. We did it for over a year, and now we let the results speak for themselves.
Mattier?
Oh, I'm just grateful for having a space of intentional individuals who want to have purposeful conversation and do it totally transparent and authentic to who we are and what we believe, and to be so different and diverse, and also so respectful of, each other in those discussions. And I think that's now more than ever what we need, honestly, in these times, in all of the chaos and the division, and making you feel like if you don't align, then you can't be friends anymore. You can't have debates and discussion without trying to rip each other apart, and tear each other down. And it just was a great reminder for that. And I learned so much from you guys each and every week. And to your point, Mooch is, the door is still open. We're not, saying that we're shutting down the King's Table forever. But I know from, all of the discussions that we had with the group collectively, we all just have so many things going on right now with our families and our businesses, that ultimately, if you got to be honest with yourself and look at where's the highest ROI in your time, your energy, and what feels most aligned with your short-term vision and values, this was one that fell lower down on the totem pole for me personally, even though I love doing it every single week. It was just one of those things where some had to give, and this happened to be one of those that is. And yet I know that we're all going to continue to have great discussions and conversations, putting out great content in our channels and our own individual podcasts. And, so many good silver linings I know will come from this. And for those that are listening, we appreciate you guys, all the support you guys have offered, sharing it out, connecting us with great people, adding your, 2 cents and your input and feedback. Hopefully it made a nice impact for you guys over the year that we got to do it with you, and that, that opportunity is still going to be out there in the future.
Mikey?
I got a quick video to share. Is it not playing the sound?
No, we hear
I
it.
can hear it. I can hear it. Let it roll, baby. Let it roll. Oh man, look at this. I haven't heard this song in a minute.
Anyway, yeah, no, this has
So
been,
good.
What a finale from Mikey.
for some reason I couldn't hear it in my
Oh, we
head.
heard it, buddy.
Oh, we heard it, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah. Must have been love. No, this has just been an honor. And, with my whole thing with content in general, like if, Maddie touched on this too. I mean, there's just seasons in our life where we got to keep the one thing, and everybody's just in a really, busy season and something's got to give. But I've learned so much from every single one of our calls and I think this is really where, if you talk to anybody that's successful, they surround themselves. I think back to the year 300 or 900 and like Greek philosophers just sitting around and like learning from each other. And I just don't think we do enough of that. And so I've probably taken more from this podcast than maybe the listeners or you guys. I know each one of us here has gotten so much from it. So I'm grateful for you guys, and it's just been fun. I've learned a ton.
I think it's important for everyone to realize that we are not just content creators. We are actually doing the work that gives us the chance to speak about these experiences. We've kind of integrated more news cycles and topics like that to comment on how that may affect the world or economics or your business or what have you. But we are all running at least one business, if not multiple businesses. We all have families. We're all husbands. We all are parents, which is why we thought this was going to be a really beautiful group of people to be able to have these discussions, because we all have unique experiences, but we're going through life together in different ways. And so I hope you guys as the audience have gained some benefit from that. But it's important to learn that we also have so much stuff going on, and we're trying to just bring the maximum amount of value we can in our lives and create maximum impact. But it has been an absolute honor for all 4 of us to record this podcast for the listeners. I'm going to encourage the listeners to get loud. If you guys want us to come back, if you want us to talk more, reach out, connect, and get loud. But we appreciate all of you guys, and continue to share it if you can and listen. But we love you guys so much. And as my final wrap up, on behalf of myself, Ashish Nathu, the Sultan of Sofas, my good friend Mike Ayala, a kind reminder, this was all my idea, but from Mike Ayala, the sage himself, one of the wisest human beings I know. Maddie Aitchison, we watch you have a baby, brother. You cut your hair. You've changed your identity. The hero of hospitality is no longer just the hero of hospitality, the Caesar of commercial, and so many other things. So proud to be able to connect with you on this. And of course, Mooch, constantly getting interest rate projections wrong. Just kidding. The trend spotter himself, continuously growing businesses, teaching us how to deal with adversity, and doing all of the things, learning that you can have everything. You can have a great family, you can have a thriving business, you can deal with change quickly, and just be a cool guy while you're being super successful. Aaron and Muchastegui, the trend spotter. It's been a privilege to do this for all four of us, and especially myself. I love you guys so much, and thank you everybody for listening to the King's Table podcast. And until next time, be the king in your own kingdom. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Ash.
Aaron, actually, because we're ending the podcast now, he didn't actually get interest rates wrong.
I was right.
Oh shit!
I wasn't going to say we had to wrap up the episode on that, but nobody will know who ended up winning the debate between Aaron and I. But based on today's summary of the Fed meeting minutes, all Fed members believe it is officially appropriate to lower rates at the next meeting if data remains the same.
That's why I decided we had to close the pod before I was wrong. Guys, it's been an honor. Ash, it's been great having you lead us, and we appreciate those kind words. And again, listeners, thanks for listening.
Love you guys.
Beautiful.